Hey guys, back again with me, Valerie. Today we'll be moving on to medium 1 or the human circulatory system. So, since this will be quite a lengthy video, I will divide this presentation into a few parts, which involves the introduction, the structure of the heart, the blood vessels, as well as the type of blood cells found in the circulatory system. So, let's jump right in, shall we? First, we have organ systems in humans. So before we talk about the circulatory system, it's important for you guys to know what an organ system is. So it's essentially a group of organs that work together to do a specific function within the body. Humans have 11 separate organ systems: integumentary, skeletal, muscular, nervous, endocrine, cardiovascular or circulatory, lymphatic, respiratory, digestive, urinary, and reproductive. And today we'll be talking about the circulatory system. So its role is to transport blood, oxygen, nutrients, and hormones around the body, while also removing waste products, which is in the form of carbon dioxide gas. It consists of blood vessels, a pump or the heart, and valves to ensure one-way flow of blood. So before we talk about the components of the circulatory system in itself, I would like to walk you guys through a comparison of vertebrate circulatory systems, since different types of vertebrates actually have different types of circulatory systems. So, the types of circulation written here, single and double, will be discussed in the next slide, and the heart chambers will be discussed in the next section. So, first of all, we have for fish, single circulation and two heart chambers. For amphibians, there's double circulation and three heart chambers. For mammals, including us humans, we have double circulation and four heart chambers. For reptiles, they also have double circulation and they have mostly three heart chambers. There are a few exceptions, such as in the case of crocodiles or alligators, where they have four heart chambers instead of three. And then lastly, we have birds, which have the same type of circulation and heart chambers as mammals. So, what's considered to be a perfect heart shape is the type that mammals and birds have, which is with four heart chambers. This is because the uneven number of heart chambers, such as three, or the lack of separation between pumping and um, receiving, such as in a fish with only two heart chambers, can lead to mixing of the oxygen the oxygenated and oxygenated blood within our system. So in mammals and birds, these bloods, the oxygenated and oxygenated, will not be mixed. Right, so for the single and double circulation, which I mentioned in the previous slide, single circulation, such as in the case of fish, means that for every one circuit of the body, the blood passes through the heart once. Like in this case, where it passes through the heart and then to the gills, the body, and back again to the heart. So one circular loop. And then for double circulation, it means that for every one circuit of the body, the blood passes through the heart twice. So first it goes to the heart and to the lungs, and then back to the heart, and then to the body, and then back to the heart again. Which means that for every one cycle of the circulatory system, the blood passes through the heart twice. First, because it goes to the lungs, and second, because it goes to the body. And then this type of circulation does have its benefits. So, in double circulation, the pressure of blood can be controlled depending on where it's being sent. When blood travels to the lungs, it loses a lot of pressure, which means it travels slower. This allows for efficient gas exchange while in the lungs, meaning that the blood will be fully oxygenated before being distributed to the body. And when the blood passes through the heart again after going through the lungs, the pressure can be raised again before being sent to the body. This means that the cells around the body can be supplied with the oxygen and glucose they need for respiration much faster and more often. Sorry. So that's the advantages of double circulation. And this has good benefits on the body. For example, higher metabolic rate, since the efficient delivery of oxygen and nutrients allows organisms to maintain a stable body temperature and a higher metabolic rate, and this in turn leads to enhanced energy production due to higher metabolic activities. Right, so that's it for the introduction to the circulatory system. Next, we'll be moving on to the mammalian heart. We'll be not discussing the fish heart nor the reptile or amphibian heart, and we'll be only focusing on the mammalian heart since it's the one most commonly asked in the curriculum. So, first of all, for the structure of the heart is oriented and labeled as if you're looking at the heart in somebody's chest right across from you. So, like, you're standing here and you're looking at the heart of somebody standing here, which is why the right side and the left side is switched, which you can see right here. So left becomes right and right becomes left. So the right side of the heart, which is the blue side over here, receives the oxygenated blood from the body, and the left side receives oxygenated blood from the lungs. And there's a lot of parts here, but we'll be discussing those in the next few slides. However, it's not mentioned within this diagram, but the thick wall between the two sides is called septum. Right, and then for the heart chambers. So the upper chambers are called atria, while the lower chambers are called ventricles. They're classified into the left and right side. The atria receive, while the ventricles distribute. Oh, sorry. This should be ventricles. And so the right atrium receives the oxygenated blood from the body. The left atrium receives oxygenated blood from the body. The right ventricle pumps the oxygenated blood to the lungs, and the left ventricle pumps oxygenated blood into the body. And then for valves, which are also mentioned in this diagram. They are needed to prevent the backflow of blood. So you can think of valves as some sort of one-way door that only allows blood to flow in one direction. So once the blood passes through the valve, then the valve would close shut. So if the blood were to go back again, it would not be able to. So there's multiple types of valves within the heart. And these are the tricuspid valve, the pulmonary valve, the mitral or bicuspid valve, and the aortic valve. So first of all, we have the tricuspid valve, which is between the right atrium here and the right ventricle. And then we have the pulmonary valve, which is between the right ventricle here and the pulmonary artery here. And then we have the mitral or bicuspid valve, which is between the left atrium and left ventricle. And then lastly, we have the aortic valve, which is between the left ventricle and aorta here. So, if you're like me and you have struggles in remembering which valve is which, I have a trick that I used back in my AGCSE days. So, since tricuspid has the same similar letters with right, tri, right, this means that the tricuspid valve is found on the right side. And for the bicuspid valve, which is the one left on the left, um, you would just need to remember the tricuspid valve as the right one, and obviously the one left is the bicuspid valve, which is on the left. And for the valves that are connected to the blood vessels, you would have to remember which um, which vessel is which. So here we have the pulmonary artery and the aorta. So if you already know which vessel you're looking at and where it's being connected, then it's simple. You just need to remember the name of that vessel since the name of the valve is the same as the name of the vessel. So the pulmonary valve is on the right, and the aortic valve is on the left. And then next we have the flow of blood. So first of all, the oxygenated blood enters the right atrium from the superior vena cava over here. And then it enters the right ventricle right here. And then the deoxygenated blood is transported to the lungs from the right ventricle through the pulmonary artery. And then the oxygenated blood from the lungs enters the left atrium from the pulmonary vein and enters the left ventricle. And then oxygenated blood is transported from the left ventricle to the body through the aorta. And you might be wondering, why are valves really that important? So valves means that since the blood will not be able to flow back, it prevents things such as arrhythmia, which means that there's a problem with the rate or rhythm of the heartbeat, infection, high blood pressure in the lungs, heart failure, or cardiac arrest, which is when the heart suddenly stops beating or beats so irregularly it can't properly pump anymore. Alright, and then moving on, we move on to blood vessels. So, blood vessels are the network of channels that carry blood throughout the body. They form a closed loop just like a circuit and begins and ends at the heart. The main types of blood vessels in the humans are arteries, veins, and capillaries. So first we have arteries, which are vessels in charge of carrying blood pumped away from the heart and the rest of the body. They distribute oxygen, nutrients, and hormones, and generally, they carry oxygenated blood. Their structure is strong, muscular, and have elastic walls. This ensures that they can withstand the high pressure of blood which is from the heart. Since they directly connect the pump with the rest of the body, then they have to have strong walls as the heart has the heart gives very high pressure to these to the blood exiting it because since the arteries don't have valves, this means that the high blood pressure is needed to maintain so that it flows in one direction and it doesn't go back into the heart. And then next we have types of arteries. So we have the aorta, which is the largest artery, which carries blood directly from the heart. And then coronary arteries, which are found around the heart tissue and supplies blood to the heart muscle. So it's found on the outside of the heart. And if there's an issue with these coronary arteries, then there will be sorry, tissue death, which means that there will be problems with the heart. And then third, we have pulmonary arteries, which transports the oxygenated blood from the heart to the lungs. I did mention earlier that arteries do carry oxygenated blood, but the pulmonary arteries are an exception since they carry deoxygenated blood. However, they are still considered arteries since they transport it away from the heart towards the lungs. So the classification of vessels don't necessarily have to connect with what type of blood they're carrying, but rather towards the direction they're taking the blood to or from the heart. And then next we have veins, which are vessels in charge of carrying blood from the body to the heart. They generally carry the oxygenated blood. So veins have thinner walls and wider lumens than arteries, which allows them to hold more blood. I'll show a diagram later on within the next few slides that describes what lumens are. So these thinner walls are possible since veins carry blood into the heart at a lower pressure, and many veins do have valves due to the lower pressure, meaning that there's a higher possibility for the blood to flow back. And then there's a lot of type of veins based on how you classify it. It can be where they're located or what they carry, but these are the important things to know for the IGCSE syllabus. So first of all, there's the superior vena cava, which is the vein that carries blood from the head, neck, arms, and chest to the heart. And then we have the inferior vena cava, which is the vein that carries blood from the legs, feet, and organs in the abdomen and pelvis. So the superior vena cava carries blood from the top half of your body, while the inferior vena cava carries blood from the lower half of your body. And then third, we have pulmonary veins, which carry oxygenated blood from the lungs to the heart. Just like pulmonary arteries, this is an exception, since it carries oxygenated blood instead of deoxygenated, which is common from veins. However, it is still considered a vein as, again, it carries blood towards the heart from the lungs. And then lastly, we have venules, which are the small veins in the body, which will eventually join together to become larger veins and eventually carry blood to the vena cava. And then next, for our third type of blood vessels, we have capillaries, which are delicate blood vessels that do not only deliver nutrients and oxygen to the body, but also removes carbon dioxide and other waste. They connect arteries and veins together, just like in this diagram. I'll elaborate further later. So capillaries have very thin walls and lack muscular and elastic tissue in their walls. This allows for gases and fluids to pass through easily. So in this diagram, we have artery on the left side and a vein on the right side. And in the middle, we have capillaries, which are very thin and branching. So this allows for the exchange of blood and also connects the vessels that have come to the end of a channel, for example. So this means that the arteries will carry blood and then carry it to an organ, and then the capillaries within that organ will connect between the artery and the vein. So the organ will still receive the oxygenated heart blood, sorry, and the capillaries will give the deoxygenated blood to the vein to be carried back to the heart. And this is the structure of the vessels compared. So the lumen is essentially the hollow space in the middle of the blood vessel, right here, the one with um, no shading or texture. And this is where the fluids, blood, and other substances travel through. So you might notice that the artery and the vein, they have different lumen sizes. This is because the arteries have to deal with high pressure blood, which means that they have a smaller lumen in order to maintain blood pressure. So around the lumen of the artery, you can see that it has a very thick wall of muscle and elastic fibers, which is important because it has to withstand the pumps from the heart. So in order to not break, it has to have a thick wall of muscle. And then for the veins, since they're carrying low pressure blood, it has a thin wall of muscle and elastic fibers since it doesn't have to withstand the pumping of the heart. And then for the lumen, it's larger because veins typically carry a lot more blood than the artery does. And then lastly, for the capillary, the wall is one cell thick, which is very thin, and this allows for gases and fluids to diffuse back and forth through, so the transport of nutrients and the absorption of carbon dioxide and release of oxygen is very easy. And it has a very wide lumen, which means that a lot of materials or substances can pass through at the same time. Alright, continuing on to the types of blood cells. So there are three main types of blood cells, which are red blood cells or erythrocytes, white blood cells or leukocytes, and platelets or thrombocytes. Besides that, there is also a liquid component of the blood called plasma. It's not necessarily a cell, in fact, it's liquid. However, it is still a key component of blood, and therefore, I will be also be discussing it within this video. So, first of all, we have red blood cells. These are the blood cells that are in charge of transporting the gases throughout the body. They are this shape and flexible, which allows them to squeeze through the smallest blood vessels. And they lack a nucleus. This is because since the red blood cells have to carry a large amount of gas at a time, they don't have a nucleus, which means that all the space within it can be used for transporting gases and gases only, which makes transport much more efficient. And they contain hemoglobin, which is a protein that binds to oxygen. And this presence of this protein is also what makes the cells red. The structure of red blood cells can be seen here as they're like a donut, but it's not hollowed all the way through. So it's more like a frisbee, I would say. And if there's a problem with the amount of blood cells, such as you don't have enough, or there's an issue with the shape or functionality, then um, anemia would happen, which is essentially a condition where your blood cells aren't able to transport the oxygen efficiently to the organs in your body. And this would lead to fatigue, shortness of breath, and also an increased risk of infection. And then next, we have white blood cells, which are a part of the body's immune system. They're in charge of protecting your body from infections, and they travel through the bloodstream. So they don't carry anything in particular, but they do travel through the blood to get to the area that they need to get to. So these cells contain a nucleus and are classified into two categories: the granulocytes, which means that there are granules or small grains within the cytoplasm, and these include neutrophils, eosinophils, and basophils, and agranulocytes, which means that there are no granules within the cytoplasm of the cell, and these include lymphocytes and monocytes. So here's the detailed breakdown of these white blood cells. So first we have neutrophils, which are here. So essentially, if you want to differentiate between which type of blood cell it is, the granulocytes or agranulocytes, you can see the diagram if the cell has these small little dots on the surface. So if it has dots on the surface, then it means that it would be a granulocyte, and that means there are granules within the cytoplasm. So first we have neutrophils, which are the most common, and they are considered the first responder to infections and help fight bacteria and fungi. Next we have eosinophiles, which fights parasitic infection and allergies. And then there are basophils, which are involved in allergies and release signals that signal inflammation. And then we have lymphocytes, which is part of the uh, agranulocytes, which are responsible for the adaptive immune response, including T cells and B cells. So these T cells and B cells are key parts of our immune system, and essentially, B cells make proteins called antibodies, which fight pathogens, and T cells protect you by destroying harmful pathogens and sending signals to help control your immune system's response to threats. So T cells destroy while B cells create antibodies. And then monocytes are the ones right here, and they can engulf or destroy pathogens and debris. So they're divided into macrophages and dendritic cells. Dendritic cells, sorry. So essentially, the phagocytes are in charge of engulfing and essentially digesting the pathogens such as maybe bacteria, and the dendritic cells, they essentially capture the pathogen or bacteria or virus, and then they give it to the T cells to initiate adaptive immune responses. So they give it to the T cells to ensure that the body has some sort of record about what kinds of infections that it has experienced in the past, which means that it will have the antibodies produced in case this type of bacteria or virus invades the body again. And then next we have platelets, which are another type of blood cells. So platelets are cell fragments in the blood that help stop bleeding by forming clots. And they lack a nucleus and are not considered true cells. So again, they're only cell fragments. And platelets allow for fibrin to be formed, which is a mesh-like protein network that allows a stable blood clot to be formed. So platelets, when there's a wound, they will um, be attracted to the wound and then bind to it, and then these platelets will release chemicals that attract other platelets to approach the injury. And then for the fibrin, it's a mesh-like protein network that is released, so it keeps the blood inside the body and it prevents overbleeding. And once the blood clot has healed, the fibrin is dissolved and um, the the injury is healed. Sorry. All right. So essentially, if you have less platelets than usual, then that means that your blood will be much more thinner. And essentially, if you're bleeding and you have an injury, this means that the platelets won't be able to clot as much, which means that you will bleed a lot more than um, what is normal. And having a lot of platelets is not necessarily a good thing either, because it means that um, there's a higher risk for blood clots to be formed, and these can lead to a lot of complications. For example, a blood clot in your vessel, which can lead to the explosion or rupturing of that vessel. And then next is the plasma, or the liquid part of blood. So this isn't a blood cell. It's a yellowish color and it does not contain any blood cells. It's primarily made out of water, but it also contains proteins, salts, hormones, vitamins, and waste products. It transports these nutrients, hormones, etc. to and from cells, and it helps maintain the proper balance of fluids in the body. Additionally, it also helps transport electrolytes to muscles. So you might be wondering what the composition of blood is. So this diagram right here is the components of blood that will appear after it's centrifuged. It is a process where the test tube is run very, very fast. And the red blood cells are the densest, which means that they will sink to the bottom, and lighter plasma would float to the top. And then in the middle, there's a layer called the buffy coat, which consists of white blood cells and platelets. So in this diagram, we can see that plasma makes up about 55% of our blood, 1% being the buffy coat or the white blood cells and platelets, and then 45% being the red blood cells. Alright, so that's it for the video about circulatory system. I hope this video helped, and if there's any problems or maybe questions, or if you guys would request any topics for me to discuss in the next video, feel free to leave a comment down below. So that's it from me. Thank you guys very much. See you next time.